Whitney Houston was the pop princess of the 80s, winner of 30 Billboard Music Awards, 22 American Music Awards, and 6 Grammy Awards.
Whitney was an extraordinary talent. Her voice was a gift to everybody.
But like many musicians before her, drug problems plagued the singer. And in 2012, she died suddenly, leaving behind a teenage daughter and a legacy that is both immense and shocking.
Her drug habit wiped out her income, wiped out her looks, wiped out her ability to make money.
For someone whose persona and music career had all the stuff legends are made of, Whitney's family scrambles to piece together her legacy.
Cissy Houston is front and center. She's denying that Whitney Houston is broke and left behind no money. But at this point, the media doesn't really know what's true and what's not.
She had run up so much debt, not paying taxes, not paying the mortgage, not paying the IRS, that she owed $1 million between taxes and various banks. And this was when she was really out of money.
The fame, the fortune, the legacy of Whitney Houston.
We want to forgive and forget the bad and remember why we idolized them in the first place.
Whitney Houston is thought to have one of the most beautiful voices in music. Often simply referred to as the voice, Houston's accolades and trailblazing are numerous. The only artist to chart 7 consecutive #1 hits, listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most awarded female act of all time. Her debut album was the best-selling debut by a woman in history. Whitney also performs award-winning movie soundtracks and stars in a number of films. Whitney creates a legacy, but it is fame and fortune that finds Whitney, and she uses it for her own means. Her insurmountable, glossy, pure image often clashes with the girl who likes to party. But if the voice is suddenly silenced, can the legend of Whitney Houston live on? This is the story of all that she left behind. Whitney Elizabeth Houston is born on August 9, 1963 in Newark, New Jersey. She is musical royalty from birth. Her mother, Cissy Houston, is a famous gospel singer. Her cousin is pop legend Dionne Warwick. And her unofficial godmother is the queen of soul herself, Aretha Franklin. With that musical pedigree, young Whitney's destiny as a recording artist seems to be in her very DNA. Her father, John, a theatrical manager, would later manage Whitney's career. By the age of 11, Whitney is a soloist in the junior gospel choir at New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey. 3 years later, she sings backup on the Michael Zager Band's single, Life's a Party. Zager, who produced one of Whitney's mother Cissy Houston's biggest hits, offers Whitney a recording contract. But her mother rejects the offer, wanting Whitney to finish school first.
Many people don't realize that Whitney Houston moved from Newark to East Orange, New Jersey at age 4. So Whitney's mother, Cissy Houston, really wanted to give Whitney a better life and give her a really nice middle-class upbringing. What made Cissy really upset and got under her skin is when Whitney would tell her classmates that she was born and raised in the projects. But Whitney Houston never actually lived in the projects, but this could have been her attempt at a very early age to start gaining some street cred.
Whitney keeps singing, and at 15 she sings background vocals on Chaka Khan's smash, I'm Every Woman. The same song will later turn into a monster hit for Whitney on the acclaimed soundtrack to The Bodyguard.
She's not only an in-demand backup singer, but she's stunning, and she's spotted at Carnegie Hall by an agent, and within a very short period of time, she's on the cover of 17 magazine. This girl was gorgeous.
In 1983, after being spotted by an A&R rep from Arista Records, the label's head, Clive Davis, hears Whitney sing in a club, and he's blown away. He offers her a worldwide recording contract. She is only 20 years old. As he starts molding his music prodigy into a star, Davis introduces her to the world on The Merv Griffin Show in June 1983. Before she belts out a cover of the song Home from the musical The Wiz, Davis tells Merv Griffin that Whitney is elegant, innocent, and has a natural charm. But her glossy image as the newest thing in pop hides a darker side. There are rumors that, like many kids her age, Whitney is experimenting with drugs.
One of Whitney's former associates, a drug dealer, claims that Whitney started using drugs around age 19 or 20, right about when she was done with school. He says he knows this because they actually used to do drugs together.
If she is using drugs, she hides it well. And for now, it seems to have no effect on her powerhouse vocals. 2 years later, on February 14th, 1985, Whitney's self-titled debut album drops. Her single, How Will I Know, hits #1, and its video introduces Houston to the MTV generation, making her the first African-American female artist to receive consistent heavy rotation on MTV.
Houston came up at a time when there was a clear divide between R&B and pop music. The quality of her voice allowed her to carry over and connect with audiences on all different kinds of levels at a very human level, and this paved the way for a lot of today's artists. Before her, it was rare to see an African-American woman consistently topping the charts. She broke barriers. She showed everyone that you could do anything if you set your mind to it. She opened that door for others, and that door can never be shut again.
With the final single from the album released in 1986, Whitney's place in pop culture is sealed. Greatest Love of All spends 3 weeks at #1 on the charts, and Whitney is the first female artist to do it. She wins her first Grammy for the single Saving All My Love for You, and Rolling Stone dubs the debut disc Best Album of 1986. It sells an estimated 30 million copies worldwide.
Whitney Houston perfected what is called the power ballad, and it's a technique that stretches out syllables, and the people that use that technique are Beyonce, Mariah Carey, even Christina Aguilera. Those people would not be here today had it not been for Whitney Houston and what she brought to the table.
In 1987, Whitney follows up her debut with another hugely successful album entitled Whitney. It sells millions around the globe and nabs the songstress her second Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Performance by a Female for the track I Wanna Dance with Somebody. At just 24 years old, Whitney is raking in major money.
Whitney Houston is packaged as a pop princess. She's got the big hair, the beautiful clothes, the incredible voice. All of this combined put her in a category all her own.
But does the whitewashed image hide a dark underbelly that might now be fueled by all that money? Whitney Houston is on the fast track to world domination of the music charts. Her songs are in constant radio rotation, and in the mid to late 80s, she's a money-making machine. Her 1985 debut album is the biggest-selling album by a new artist. Its follow-up in 1987 is the first album by a woman to debut in a top spot on the charts. With some money in hand, Whitney starts spending. In 1987, she buys a $2.7 million mansion worthy of a rising pop star. By 1988, she racks up a massive 7 consecutive #1 hits. She has broken the Beatles' record.
Breaking the Beatles' record was such a huge deal and previously unheard of from an African American, yet she was just getting started. Whitney had the image of an extremely talented and beautiful diva. She was appealing on the radio, on television, in print. She was the whole enchilada.
Whitney continues to wow audiences around the globe. At her peak, she reportedly earns $30 million a year. But the adoration for breaking records as a musician, as a woman, and as an African American takes a beating when she's announced as a nominee at the 1989 Soul Train Awards.
She was booed at the Soul Train Music Awards, and this really affected her. People were calling her Whitey Houston, even black DJs, not just people in the public. And so it affected her so much, it actually hurt her, and she came up with her next album, I'm Your Baby Tonight, which brought her back to her R&B roots and showed that she still had soul.
Unlike her previous releases, with I'm Your Baby Tonight, Whitney has more control over the album's content. She adds the hot producing team of L.A. Reid and Babyface to her list of contributors, as well as Motown legend Stevie Wonder. The album doesn't sell quite as well as her first two in the US, and only peaks at #3 on the pop charts. but it goes all the way to #1 on the R&B charts. The Soul Train Awards have both an effect on her music and on her personal life. That same night, she meets R&B singer Bobby Brown at the event, and they start dating. If she's looking for an image makeover, she certainly finds it in Bobby Brown. His bad boy status is the polar opposite of hers.
When Whitney Houston got together with Bobby Brown, people were shocked. Whitney Houston was always known for her good girl image, and everyone was really shocked and surprised and could not figure out why she was with this character.
The following year, Whitney performs an unforgettable rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner at Super Bowl 25. The U.S. has just entered the Gulf War, and her performance comes at a very patriotic time. It's called the best Super Bowl performance of all time. The response is so overwhelmingly positive that a single and video of the stirring performance is released, with all proceeds donated to the American Red Cross Gulf Crisis Fund. In July of 1992, she marries Bobby Brown in a lavish wedding ceremony at her Mendham, New Jersey home.
When Whitney Houston married Bobby Brown, it was an over-the-top affair. There were 800 guests, and Whitney's dress cost $40,000 alone. There were little children lined up, welcoming them down the aisle with small violins, all dressed in white.
The marriage proves to be a roller coaster ride, but for now, Whitney is on top of the world. By 1993, her career is diversifying, and she stars in her first movie, The Bodyguard, opposite Kevin Costner. The movie is the second highest grossing film worldwide that year. The soundtrack reportedly earns Whitney a whopping $33 million.
When Whitney Houston filmed The Bodyguard, her lead single, I Will Always Love You, became the #1 hit in the country, and it sold 4 million copies. This song is the best-selling song by a female artist in history.
I Will Always Love You wasn't written by her, and royalties are always paid to the songwriter, and that happened to be Dolly Parton. But it sold millions and millions of copies, and Whitney did just fine. She just didn't make as much money as people thought she did.
Soon after her wedding to Bobby Brown, Whitney is pregnant and decides to get her paperwork in order. So while pregnant in 1993, at the age of 30, Whitney prepares her will. After the birth of her daughter, Whitney's career keeps soaring. To Hollywood, she's box office gold. In 1995, she co-stars with Angela Bassett in Waiting to Exhale. The soundtrack features 3 new songs by Whitney, and the album spends 5 weeks at #1. The following year, she stars in her third movie, The Preacher's Wife, opposite Denzel Washington.
At this point, Whitney is at the top of her career. She's starring in The Preacher's Wife, and she's making an unprecedented $10 million for this film, which is a huge figure in 1993. The album for this film also went on to become the #1 gospel-selling album in the history of the world.
But by this time, Whitney's star is starting to get a little tarnished. She has canceled concerts due to what her camp calls a persistent throat condition. Her behavior is erratic, and when she does perform live, she needs to sing in a lower key because she just can't hit the big notes. Rumors of drug abuse begin to surface. Her fortune, once huge, is also starting to dwindle.
Whitney Houston did have a large entourage. She was paying bodyguards, security, chauffeurs, publicists, agents, managers, you name it.
There's even reports that she had her father on payroll, and that she said that she was paying him between $52,000 and $90,000 a year for almost the whole decade of the 90s, so that adds up. But at the same time, she's canceling concerts, losing revenue, so she clearly doesn't get that she's got to make this money last.
Though she's starting to become known for her volatile behavior and failing voice, Whitney's dedication to charity work and social justice never wavers. In 1988, she performs at the London concert celebrating Nelson Mandela's 70th birthday while he's still in prison. In October of 1994, she meets the iconic statesman who has now become president at a White House dinner where she performs for guests. Whitney also forms the Whitney Houston Foundation for Children in 1989. It's a nonprofit organization that cares for the homeless as well as children with cancer and AIDS and works toward the prevention of child abuse.
Many people don't realize it, but Whitney Houston was quite the humanitarian. She won many awards and raised millions of dollars for her favorite charities, such as the American Red Cross and the United Negro College Fund.
She continues making music, but it's believed drug use is starting to ravage her voice. Rumors that she and Brown have a cocaine problem run rampant. By the 1996 release of The Preacher's Wife, it's later told that she's doing drugs every day. By the end of the 90s, Whitney is back in the studio to record her fourth non-soundtrack album.
My Love Is Your Love was her first studio cut album in 8 years. It peaked at number 13, which is the lowest numbers to date.
Despite the album not climbing higher, it's still a hit globally, reaching the top 5 in France, Germany, and the UK, among other countries. It later nabs Whitney her 6th and final Grammy in 2000 for the track It's Not Right, But It's Okay. She heads out on a world tour in support of the album in 1999.
At this point in her career, Whitney Houston's starting to exhibit some strange and erratic behavior, and people can start to sense that she might be on a decline, actually. She canceled 2 concerts in her hometown of Newark and canceled a concert in San Francisco just 15 minutes before taking the stage.
The rumors about drug abuse intensify, and it's becoming apparent that the bulk of her money isn't just being used to pay her staff. With awards, record-breaking album sales, and a voice often described as angelic, Whitney Houston is rolling in the dough, but she's also spending it just as fast. Also, while on tour for her album My Love Is Your Love, she's acting strange and canceling costly shows. The true Whitney appears to be the one married to R&B singer Bobby Brown. He's a notorious bad boy who likes to party, and as even Whitney later admits, she likes to party right along with him. In a 1993 Rolling Stone interview, Whitney says, "I am not always in a sequined gown. I am nobody's angel. I can get down and dirty."
People looked at it as if she were strong-minded, but in fact, there was a real vulnerability there, coupled with a rebelliousness, because as she was growing up, there were so many controls in her life, guiding her, encouraging her, and pushing her to behave in a good girl, proper way, with a face on for the community, for the society. And I think Bobby tapped into that undercurrent of rebellion, of wanting to be her own person, and that's what she hooked into with him.
Her appearance at a high-profile event in 2001 leaves little doubt that Whitney is deep into addiction.
Those pictures of her at that performance were really shocking. And it was really testimony to how ravaged she had become, how much she had deteriorated, how extreme her drug use and abuse had taken hold. And what was really unfortunate was all the denial and negating that went on around it by her team, by the press, that it was nothing, she just wasn't feeling well, because that was the kind of propaganda, if you will, that actually continued to perpetuate her ongoing drug usage and abuse.
Her drug habit wiped out her income, wiped out her looks, wiped out her ability to make money. It was a vicious cycle, and she was on the losing end. When we saw her on some of these interviews, how thin and how destroyed she looked, it was shocking, it was terrifying, but it was really sad. I think most people turned away out of sadness. It was just too hard to watch. This girl was gorgeous. This girl had everything going for her. And drugs took over, but they destroyed her body, they destroyed her looks.
To make matters worse, reports start breaking that Whitney is flat broke. Despite all of this, in 2001, she signs a $100 million contract with Arista Records, the biggest recording deal in music history. She's expected to deliver 6 new albums.
When an artist signs a $100 million contract, they don't get that money all at once. It's kind of like a writer getting advance for a book. It's paid in stages based on the success of the releases, the upcoming releases that they have contracted for.
In 2002, she releases Just Whitney, her first studio album in 4 years. And the following year, One Wish, the holiday album, drops. Sales of these 2 don't even come close to what she once pulled in. Soon after she signs the multi-million-dollar contract, Whitney is sued by her own father.
They claim that Whitney failed to pay John Houston Entertainment, her father's company, for managing her during her career and actually helped saving her career. In fact, they sued her for $100 million because they claim that they brought about this $100 million contract, and they rescued her from the real depths of the legal struggle she was having in the late 90s.
It's really interesting because they said they weren't her managers per se, but supposedly they masterminded this $100 million contract, so they wanted a piece of it as well. Supposedly 20%, but for some reason they were asking for $100 million in their lawsuit.
And ultimately, that lawsuit was dismissed because John Houston passed away.
Questions about Whitney's drug use continue as her erratic behavior increases. Then in 2002, she finally decides to address it in a very public way. She tells Diane Sawyer on an ABC primetime special that she's abused alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, and pills. The only drug, she says, she doesn't use is crack, because, as she says, crack is whack, and she makes too much money to ever smoke it. Then Whitney makes another major mistake when Bobby Brown is approached to star in a reality series about his life. She agrees. When Being Bobby Brown airs on Bravo beginning in June 2005, the curtain is drawn back on Whitney and Bobby's chaotic life.
At this point in Whitney's career, she's already been to rehab twice, and her records are not selling as well as they used to. This series was seen by many as a way to restart Bobby Brown's career. He was completely a has-been by this point, and nobody knew him as anything other than Whitney Houston's husband. What happened, though, was that it might have propped Bobby Brown up a little bit, but it really ruined Whitney's image because on the show, she chain smoked, she was cursing. I mean, why would one of the greatest singers of all time want to expose herself on a reality TV show like this? It just doesn't make any sense.
Critics call the show a train wreck, and many consider this to be Whitney's darkest public hour. It does little to dispel the rumors of Whitney's continuing drug addiction. Meanwhile, her fortune keeps dwindling.
In 2006, almost 5 years after she signed a $100 million contract, her $6 million New Jersey mansion is nearly foreclosed on.
Apparently, she had run up so much debt, not paying taxes, not paying the mortgage, not paying the IRS, that she owed $1 million between taxes and various banks, and this was when she was really out of money.
That same year, Whitney files for divorce from Bobby after 14 years of marriage.
One of the most difficult things to do is end and walk away from a codependent relationship. The reason being, the nature of the symbiosis, the attachment, the connection, the mutual dependence is so intense and so extreme that each partner feels they cannot survive and won't be able to live without the other person. Sometimes one person is able to make the exit, but then not only does their guilt do them in, the other person saying, I can't survive without you, how can you abandon me, just throws the coals onto the fire. And so it's really hard to end this kind of needy, dependent, controlling relationship.
The divorce forces her to take stock of her assets. They don't amount to much.
So in the divorce paperwork, Whitney Houston discloses that she has $4 million in different debts. And on the other side, she only has like $300,000 in life insurance to support her daughter.
She also had the $225,000 in her stock portfolio and about $40,000 in cash at the time.
This is years after signing a $100 million contract. I mean, it's crazy.
In the case of the divorce, Bobby Brown got nothing but visitation. Supposedly, he was seeking a financial settlement, didn't show up at court, so Whitney Houston won by default. Then Bobby Brown appealed it, and guess what? He didn't show up again.
That's not a good way to win your divorce proceedings, but it really boils down to the prenup, because in the prenuptial agreement, he wasn't entitled to child support or spousal support, and Whitney Houston filed a declaration saying that she was worried he was going to go after those things because she had been supporting him for years.
In 2007, Whitney loses designer clothes, instruments, and personal items in a court-ordered auction to pay off a $200,000 storage debt.
At this point, Whitney Houston owned a $6.5 million mansion in New Jersey, but it did have a $3.3 million mortgage on it. She also had a townhouse in Atlanta worth over $1 million, and that had over $1 million mortgage on it as well.
Yeah, on top of that, she did accumulate, according to the paperwork, about $2 million in art and jewelry. So she was obviously spending that money on something. So you add it all up together, that is almost $10 million in assets, set off that $4 million in debt. The problem is that there's no liquidity there. There's no cash to spend.
In 20 years, she has gone from being worth reportedly $44 million to $6 million. By 2010, the National Enquirer reports that Whitney is spending a ridiculous amount of money to feed her cocaine habit. $300,000 a year.
Somebody spending that much money on drugs, that's a massive amount of drugs. And of course, one of the questions you have to ask is, what's the quality of the drug usage? What's her relationship to her dealers? Are they charging her more money because she's got the financial resources? Are they giving her a break because she's Whitney Houston? You can't just make the assumption that all of that is going into her body, but it certainly is a tremendous amount of money to be being spent on drugs.
The writing seems to be on the wall. Party promoter Marlon David is quoted as saying, "Whitney is a dead woman walking. With the amount of drugs she's buying, she won't be able to live long. She'll be dead in months." He's not far off the truth. Still, Whitney seems poised for a possible comeback. And in 2010, she heads out on a world tour in support of her album, I Look to You. It's her first studio album in 6 years, and her first tour in over a decade. The Nothing But Love World Tour grosses $36 million.
Well, at this point, even though her income had dropped off, her spending habits certainly didn't, because reportedly she was giving her daughter a $5,000 a month spending allowance. They were taking lavish vacations, flying on private jets, staying in luxury hotels.
And don't forget the big shopping sprees.
Big shopping sprees, of course. And there just wasn't the money coming in to pay for all this.
When Whitney Houston started touring again, it was a complete disaster. Her fans would walk out of her shows early, completely unhappy. There was video of Whitney's voice just so hoarse, nothing like the angelic sounds we were used to hearing. And what did the fans think except that they saw her chain smoking on this show? So they knew that the cigarettes and the reported drug use were just not contributing to her stamina on stage. And as a singer, she was really in a decline at this point.
The following year, in 2011, Whitney goes back to rehab as an outpatient, citing drug and alcohol problems.
Given the years of drug abuse and how severe it became and the toll that it took in every capacity on her image, on her physical health, on her marriage, and most importantly on her career was just winded. I think the only way out of that is with rehabilitation. I mean, the intensity of that drug problem was not possible for her to tackle on her own.
But even with the rehab, many feel that Whitney's still a bit of a mess. She's scheduled to appear at a pre-Grammy party given every year by her mentor Clive Davis on February 11th, 2012, the night before the Grammys. Witnesses say they see Whitney drinking heavily by the hotel pool that morning. Then, just hours before Clive Davis's party, tragedy strikes.
At 3:35 that afternoon, Whitney's assistant found Whitney lying face down in a foot of water in her bathtub. She obviously frantically tried to resuscitate Whitney. They called 911, but when the paramedics arrived, she was dead upon arrival, and she was only 48 years old. It was such a tragedy, and the entire world really mourned her loss.
It really became a question not of if it was going to happen and she was going to pass away, but more importantly, when it was going to happen, because up until that point, Whitney had closed all the doors on her exit out of her drug usage, and there were no other doors open for her.
With fans already gathering outside the Beverly Hilton for the big party, the coroner arrives, and the hallway turns into a crime scene. A dozen distraught family members and friends demand to know what happened. There are no immediate answers and no real evidence. But already many people assume drugs are involved. As Whitney's body lays 4 floors up, Clive Davis's party goes on.
I think it was completely disrespectful for Clive Davis to not cancel his pre-Grammy party. Everybody knew about how close of a relationship Clive and Whitney had, so even if he wasn't distraught completely on a personal level, Professionally, he should have really honored Whitney's legacy and her life by showing her some more respect and canceling that party.
The following night at the Grammy Awards ceremony, Whitney's untimely passing is addressed right off the bat. LL Cool J recites a prayer as everyone bows their heads.
Keith Ehrlich, who produced the Grammy Awards, decided to honor Whitney Houston at that year's Grammys. Jennifer Hudson stepped up to sing I Will Always Love You. And it was very stirring because she said that when she won her Grammy Award, Whitney Houston's the one that gave it to her first one. And that almost overshadowed her winning it, meeting her idol that way. But there was some controversy about this. People didn't think it was right to honor somebody in such a way who had thrown everything away for drugs.
Autopsy reports are released in early April 2012. The cause of death is attributed to accidental drowning, with contributing factors of atherosclerotic heart disease and cocaine use. With millions of dollars made and lost a few times over, and reports that she is nearly penniless, what kind of a mess does Whitney leave behind? Whitney Houston is dead. On February 11th, 2012, at only 48 years old, the singer is found face down in her hotel bathtub. The cause? Accidental drowning, with contributing factors of heart disease and acute cocaine use. It's an unglamorous end for the pop diva, once known for her glitzy gowns, megawatt smile, and soaring vocals. Whitney has blown millions on the high life, and less than a month before she dies, tabloids run a story saying Whitney is broke. There are rumors that she called people to borrow as little as $100 just weeks before she died.
You know, in Whitney Houston's prime, she was worth as much as $150 million reportedly, bringing in $30 million a year, and now she's having to beg and borrow for a few bucks just to have food to eat and to live.
It is surprising. You wonder, was it her lavish lifestyle? Was it her spending? Was it drugs and alcohol? It would be a lot to go through $150 million in a lifetime.
Whitney's 1993 will states that she leaves everything to any children of hers who survive her. So her 18-year-old daughter, Bobby Christina, becomes her sole beneficiary. Bobby Christina is set to inherit 10% of Whitney's estate at age 21, another 1/6 at age 25, and the rest at age 30. Many celebrities don't leave their estate in a will. They often create a trust instead, leaving all their assets to one person, a trustee, to divvy it up. But with a will, it has to go through a probate court to be reviewed.
Well, Whitney Houston only had a will, and her will had to go through probate court, which led to a lot of delays before any money could start being distributed.
That's right. Whenever a will goes through the probate court, the beneficiaries don't get the money right away. It has to go through the court process. And in this case, there was a testamentary trust in Whitney Houston's will, which meant that Bobby Christina would get the money outside of the probate court, but you still needed to start the probate court process.
You've got the cost, the delays, the expense, the aggravation.
But then shocking news is dropped. Not only is there no money left for Bobby Christina, but it appears there is a whopping $20 million debt to be paid to Whitney's record label, Arista Records.
Whitney Houston may have signed one of the largest recording contracts of her time for $100 million. But the irony is, she never received that $100 million. She only received a $30 to $40 million advance, and that was for record sales.
Records do not sell in this decade like they did in the 80s, so it's very hard to make that back.
Until she sold enough records from her next 3 albums after signing the deal to earn the record company back enough money for her to keep that $30–40 million. She owed the record company that money back. So that's why when she died, there was still this huge debt to be paid because her sales weren't there.
Whitney Houston's death causes a major frenzy in the media, and Cissy Houston is front and center. She's denying that Whitney Houston is broke and left behind no money. But at this point, the media doesn't really know what's true and what's not. And pretty soon we're gonna start to see members of Whitney Houston's family trying to cash in on her legacy.
On February 18th, 2012, Whitney's funeral is held at the New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey, where Whitney sang as a young girl. It's a star-studded, nationally televised event with invitation-only seats reserved for celebrities and personalities. Despite all the money woes, she is buried in over $550,000 worth of jewelry. At this point, All that Bobby Christina inherits is her mother's tangible property, like jewelry and clothing, including a $250,000 diamond ring. A live feed of Whitney's funeral is provided to several media outlets, but everyone has to pull the footage 24 hours later. The reason is that Whitney's family agrees to license footage to a few media outlets to help maximize the estate for the benefit of Bobby Christina. Considering Sissy's denial of Whitney's huge debt, the family continues to pull in money just months after her death. Designer gowns and jewelry are auctioned off at Julian's Hollywood Legends. Bidders pay a total of $80,000, with a bustier fetching the highest amount at $19,200. Then, Sissy Houston writes a tell-all book, Remembering Whitney. It's published in January 2013. Later that month, while promoting the book, Sissy appears on Oprah's Next Chapter, along with Whitney's brother Michael. When Oprah addresses the public's perception that Bobby Brown introduced Whitney to drugs, Michael drops a bombshell.
Whitney Houston and her brother Michael were really close when they were younger, and he claims that he was the one who actually got Whitney into drugs. He says that they freebased cocaine for the first time at age 19, and it's really sad because he blames himself for Whitney's death, which is quite understandable as it seems like he turned her on to drug use in the first place.
To me, it sounds like what he saw happen to his sister, he may have felt badly about and or responsible for. And sounds like the justification or the rationalizing of why he was exposing her to cocaine in the first place, that it was part of the industry, it's what everybody was doing, it was not such a big deal and it was not such a bad thing, and that was his way of coming to some peace with ultimately the way that drugs took over her life.
Whitney's family continues to deal with the difficult task of parceling out her estate and managing the debt. But things are about to change, and there's a battle brewing. Whitney Houston has left her entire legacy to her only child, 18-year-old daughter, Bobby Christina. She gets 10% of her mother's estate at age 21, another 1/6 at age 25, and the rest at age 30. But Whitney died penniless, and with a $20 million debt over her head.
After her death, nostalgia starts to set in. It's like having a terrible parent and forgiving them on their deathbed or whispering their forgiveness over their coffin. You want to only remember the good, and really only the good memories come into play at this point. After she died, her album started selling again, as they always do in these circumstances. But that doesn't mean her estate will see any of that, because that money, royalties from those sales, first goes to pay off her debts before it ever goes to her estate.
Whitney Houston's record sales went through the roof after she passed away, and that the estate was able to bring in so much money that it actually wiped out the existing debts and added up to something between $12 and $20 million, depending on what report you want to believe. So clearly, this estate got turned around and there was money there for Bobby Christina.
6 months after her death, Whitney's final film performance hits theaters. Sparkle, in which she plays the title character's mother, is number 5 at the box office on its opening weekend. She sings 2 songs on the soundtrack, and the first official lead single, a duet with the film star Jordan Sparks, is released in May 2012. It's the very last song Whitney recorded.
Like many celebrities, once they pass away, the value of what they've done increases, and Whitney Houston's estate was no different. When she passed away, the next day iTunes raised the price of her singles from 99 cents to $1.29.
Now, the Whitney Houston estate would only see a percentage of this increase, but clearly the prices going up and the new sales that were generated led to a financial windfall for the estate and really turned things around.
With Whitney's estate now booming, her daughter Bobby Christina stands to inherit millions by the time she's 30. But her family is worried that she'll dwindle the money away. And in October 2012, they file a petition.
Now, once the estate started getting some money, Whitney Houston's family members started getting really worried about what was going to happen to Bobby Christina. So they actually went to court and filed a petition to challenge the testamentary trust and change it. They claimed that Whitney Houston never would have wanted Bobby Christina to start receiving millions of dollars at such a young age, 21, and they worried that her getting that money could actually kill her.
They were worried about her being unduly influenced by other individuals and people coming after her just for her money.
Weeks after the petition is filed, the case is settled, and the original agreement stands. 18-year-old Bobby Christina will receive 10% of the estate when she turns 21, 20% at age 25, and the remaining amount when she turns 30. As sole beneficiary, Bobby Christina is looking at inheriting a tidy sum. But it seems she might have inherited more than just money from her famous mother. She has a flair for the dramatic and perhaps a taste for illicit substances.
On her 18th birthday, Bobby Christina is allegedly seen doing cocaine, and many gossip and news websites are reporting this news, and it's causing quite a frenzy in the media. What's even worse and what's so much sadder is that it's also been reported that Bobby Christina is getting high just several hours after her own mother's funeral.
Throughout her life, Bobby Christina often witnessed violent outbursts between her parents. Whitney and Bobby Brown's former chauffeur also alleges that the couple did crack in the limo in front of their daughter.
I think Bobby Christina's behavior was inevitable given the family environment that she grew up in, the volatility, the drug abuse, the helplessness modeled on her mother's part, the fighting, the out-of-control rage that was turned against each other and on oneself, ultimately caught up with her.
To add fuel to the fire, Bobby Christina is involved in a controversial relationship.
Supposedly, not only did Bobby Christina had drug and alcohol issues that she was struggling with, but there was also someone else in the picture, Nick Gordon, who was raised as her brother, and yet they started to have a relationship after Whitney Houston passed away.
Yeah, that gives a whole new meaning to the word sibling relationship, I guess. But it was a relationship that Cissy Houston, Whitney's mother, called incestuous, and the family was very much against it. And you have to wonder, how much did this money play into it? Because here's Nick Gordon. He comes into the picture and they get married. They get married 2 months before Bobby Christina turns 21, which is the magical time that she starts receiving millions of dollars.
And you have to keep in mind this relationship. Nick Gordon was taken in by Whitney Houston when he was 12 years old because his father was in prison and his mother couldn't care for him. So he was really raised as a sibling with Bobby Christina, and that's why this whole thing is so shocking.
Regardless of whether or not she would approve of her daughter's relationship, Whitney's original wishes as stated in her will are respected, and Bobby Christina receives the first 10% of her mother's estate in March 2014. Although many great female vocalists will continue to grace the world with their talents, Whitney Houston, or The Voice as many still refer to her, will always stand out. In her heyday, she mesmerized audiences with her vocal acrobatics. Now that her estate is settled, Whitney's legacy as one of the greatest talents of her time can live on.
Given time, people tend to forget the bad. They want to remember the good. We remember Thin Elvis. John Belushi will always be a blues brother. We romanticize Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin. We want to forgive and forget the bad and remember why we idolized them in the first place.
In the final analysis, Whitney was an extraordinary talent. Her voice was a gift to everybody. And what's most important is that her music and her talent transcend the demons and the drugs that brought her down. And that's what we want to remember her by, was the gift she gave us all.
Even though Whitney Houston had a turbulent marriage, drug use, and a rocky relationship with many members of her family, her legacy will be that she left a repertoire of music that touched so many people. The songs that she made, the music, her voice, and her beautiful smile and demeanor is what I think ultimately is going to live on as her legacy, as it should.